I'm Erica, and I never imagined that I would become entangled in a family conflict that would permanently alter my life. I was in this city at the age of 29 and leading a very normal life. I had been employed as a secretary at Global Tech, a large downtown firm, for the previous 5 years. Although it wasn't glitzy, it covered my little rental apartment's expenses. I would immerse myself in the beat of dancing classes on the weekends, forgetting about the mountain of paperwork that awaited me on Monday. I was happy with my life, even if it wasn't much. But family was tricky. Emily, my younger sister, had always been the best kid. As if she were made of spun sugar, our mother showered her with affection from the day she was born. Dad, he simply followed Mom's wishes, that's all. Every time, it was Emily this or Emily that. It was difficult to avoid feeling like a shadow in my own family, but I made an effort to avoid becoming resentful. We became more and more apart as the years passed. Visits increased while phone calls decreased. On social media, I would see photos of family get-togethers to which I was not invited, with Emily always in the spotlight, beaming with our parents. I convinced myself that I was better off concentrating on my own life, even if it hurt. That's why one Tuesday night, when Mom's number appeared on my phone, I almost dropped it. Bracing myself for whatever drama could be on the other end, I paused before responding. Through the speaker, her voice crackled, "Erica, it's your mother." "Hi, Mom," I said, attempting to seem indifferent. "Is everything okay?" She said, "Your father wants to see you," without holding back. "This weekend, are you able to see the house?" 2 p.m. on Saturday. Avoid being late. She hung up after saying that. I was experiencing a range of feelings as I gazed at my phone. Dad wanted to meet me after all this time, but what could be so important? Curiosity overcame my desire to turn down the offer in order to shield myself from the anticipated disappointment. If only to see what was happening, I would go. I inhaled deeply as I stood outside my parents' opulent house on Saturday. As a testament to my parents' achievements and a reminder of the life I will never fully fit into, the house continued to look the same. I pressed the doorbell with half the expectation and half the hope that no one would respond. My mother appeared with a veneer of courteous indifference on her face as the door flew wide. She said, "You're here," and moved aside to give me access. The living room is where everyone is. My sister Emily, her husband James, and my father, who seemed pale and drawn, were seated in the comfortable living room. There were many whispered statements and covert motives, and the mood was heated. Feeling alienated in my own family's house, I sat on the edge of an armchair. I could see how elderly Dad appeared up close. His eyes appeared sunken, and his skin was pale, almost transparent. The realization that this was more than a casual family get-together sent a shiver down my spine. Dad went on, looking around the room. "I've got something to tell you all," Dad said. "I have a terminal illness. I don't have much time left, according to the physicians." The word struck me like a punch to the body. Tears sprung from my eyes as I gasped. I liked my father even though we had a tense relationship. The idea of losing him was too painful. I gasped, "Daddy," and grabbed for his hand. With a sorrowful grin, he gave me a feeble squeeze. Emily buried her face in her husband's shoulder and sobbed dramatically. Mom's lips were squeezed into a narrow line as she sat with a stony expression. I pondered how long they had been aware of this and how long they had concealed it from me. Dad continued, "There's more," in an increasingly forceful voice. "I've made some decisions about my will." Everyone leaned in and listened carefully as the room went silent, even Emily's cries becoming quieter. "Mary," Dad added, turning to face Mom, "you'll get this city apartment." Mom gave a quick nod, as though this was to be expected. "Emily, the house will be yours." A smile pierced my sister's tears as her eyes brightened. When Dad turned to face me, I noticed a new level of resolve in his eyes. "I've made the decision to leave you my funds, Eric. The whole thing, $800,000. I had trouble breathing for a while. $800,000. I had never imagined having so much money. More than anything else, though it seemed like recognition, a means of atoning for years of being ignored. There was an unbearable quiet for a while. Then everything went haywire. Emily's face twisted in anger as she leaped to her feet. "That's unfair, Dad. These days, Erica is seldom ever included in the family. She isn't worthy of it." Mom growled, staring at me as though I had planned this. "John, you need to exclude her from the will." I sat there, stunned, as my mother and sister railed against me. Then Dad slammed his fist on the coffee table, the sound echoing through the room. "Enough," he roared, his face flushed with anger. "This is my decision, and I won't change it." Turning to Mom, his eyes blazing, he continued, "I've been under your influence for far too long, Mary. I've neglected Erica because of you, and it ends now." The room fell silent once more. I stared at my father, seeing him in a new light. For the first time in my life, he was standing up for me. Dad turned to me then, his anger melting into sorrow. "Erica, can you ever forgive me? I've been a terrible father to you." Tears streamed down my face as I moved to him, wrapping my arms around his frail frame. "I forgive you, Dad," I whispered. "I love you." We held each other for a long moment, years of hurt and misunderstanding flowing away. When we finally separated, Dad looked exhausted. "I need to rest now," he said slowly, getting to his feet. "Erica, thank you for coming." As Dad left the room, the atmosphere shifted palpably. Mom stepped forward, her face a mask of barely contained fury. "Listen here, Erica. You need to do the right thing and give up your share of the inheritance." "No," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I won't give it up. Dad wants me to have it, and I'm respecting his wishes." Emily's face contorted with rage as she stepped closer, her finger jabbing at my chest. "You'll regret this, Erica. Mark my words." Over the next 2 weeks, my phone buzzed constantly with messages from Mom and Emily, each one demanding I give up the inheritance. Their tone grew increasingly hostile and threatening. I ignored them all, focusing on work and my dance classes, trying to find some semblance of normalcy. Then on a gray Tuesday morning, I got the call I'd been dreading. Dad had passed away in his sleep. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and somber faces. Mom and Emily put on a show of grief, wailing dramatically and clutching each other. I noticed Emily wearing an obscenely expensive necklace and bracelet set, the diamonds catching the light as she dabbed at her dry eyes. After the service, we gathered at the house. I watched in disgust as Emily made a show of removing her jewelry, tucking it into her purse with exaggerated care. As the last of the guests trickled out, I gathered my things, eager to escape. That's when all hell broke loose. My jewelry. Emily shrieked, her hands flying to her face in mock horror. "It's gone. Someone's stolen it." Mom's eyes locked onto me, her gaze accusing. Well, isn't it convenient that the only person who's been here all day is the one who stands to gain so much? I felt the blood drain from my face as I realized what was happening. They were setting me up. "You can't be serious." I sputtered. "I didn't take anything." Emily's husband stepped forward, his voice laced with false concern. "Then you won't mind showing us what's in your purse, right, Erica?" I clutched my bag tighter, my mind racing. I knew I was innocent, but something told me that wouldn't matter. No, I said firmly. I don't have to prove anything to you. Emily's husband pulled out his phone. Then you leave me no choice. I'm calling the police. As he dialed, I saw a triumphant smirk flash across Emily's face. In that moment, I realized just how far they were willing to go to get what they wanted. I stood frozen, my heart pounding, as two officers entered the house. Emily immediately launched into a tearful account of her stolen jewelry, painting herself as the grieving daughter victimized on the day of her father's funeral. Officers, Emily's husband said, his voice dripping with false concern, "We have reason to believe Erica may have taken the jewelry. She's refusing to show us the contents of her purse." The older of the two officers turned to me, his face impassive. "Ma'am, would you mind opening your purse for us?" I felt trapped, knowing that whatever happened next would not end well for me. With shaking hands, I opened my purse. The officer looked inside, and his expression hardened. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to come with us," he said, reaching into my purse and pulling out Emily's necklace and bracelet. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "This is impossible," I stammered. "I didn't take these. I'm being set up." But my protests fell on deaf ears. Mom and Emily launched into a tirade, calling me a thief and a liar, hurling insults that cut deeper than any knife. As the officers led me out, I caught a glimpse of Emily's smug smile hidden behind her hand as she pretended to sob. At the police station, I sat in a stark interrogation room, still in my funeral clothes, trying to make sense of what had happened. Hours passed, and then the door opened. To my surprise, it was my mother who walked in, not a police officer. She dismissed the officer standing guard, insisting on speaking to me alone. As soon as the door closed behind her, Mom's demeanor changed entirely. Gone was the grieving widow, replaced by a cold, calculating woman I barely recognized. "Listen carefully, Erica," she hissed, leaning close. "You have one chance to fix this mess. Give up the inheritance, sign it over to M, and all of this goes away. The charges, the scandal, everything." I stared at her, disbelief warring with a growing sense of betrayal. You set me up, your own daughter." Mom's laugh was harsh and humorless. "Oh please, you stopped being part of this family long ago. Now you have a choice. Give up the money, or we'll make sure you go to prison. Think about it, Erica, a thief who stole from her own sister at their father's funeral. Your reputation will be ruined. You'll lose everything." I felt sick to my stomach, the full weight of their betrayal crashing down on me. "No," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I won't do it. I didn't steal anything, and I won't let you blackmail me." Mom's eyes flashed with anger. "You ungrateful little rat," she spat. "I hope you enjoy prison. Everyone will know what you did, stealing from your own family. You'll be nothing but a criminal, a disgrace." With that, she turned on her heel and left, slamming the door behind her. I sat there stunned, tears streaming down my face as the reality of my situation sank in. I was released on bail later that night, stumbling out of the police station into the cool night air. My phone buzzed, a message from my boss at Global Tech. My stomach dropped as I read it. "Erica, I've heard some disturbing rumors. Until the situation is resolved, I think it's best you take some time off. Paid leave, of course. I believe in your innocence, but we need to protect the company's reputation. Take care." I leaned against the cold brick wall of the station, feeling my world crumbling around me. In the span of a day, I'd lost my father, been betrayed by my family, been arrested, and now I was on the verge of losing my job. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. With trembling fingers, I searched online for private investigators in the area. One name stood out, Jack Reeves, a former police detective turned PI with a reputation for solving complex cases. I made the call, my voice steadier than I expected, as I explained my situation. "Miss Thompson," Jack said after I finished my story, "this is a delicate situation. Family conspiracies are never easy to prove, but if what you're saying is true, we'll find evidence. It won't be cheap, though." I thought of the inheritance I was fighting for. Money's not an issue. I need to clear my name and expose what they've done. The next 3 weeks were a blur of clandestine meetings with Jack, anxious waiting, and sleepless nights. I threw myself into my dance classes on weekends, desperate for any distraction from the constant worry. My phone remained silent, no calls from work, no more threats from my family. The silence was almost worse than the conflict. Then one rainy afternoon, my phone rang. It was Jack. "Erica," he said, his voice grave. "I've got news, but you're not going to like it." My heart sank. "What is it?" Jack sighed heavily. "I've been following your mother and sister, trying to catch them discussing the inheritance or the theft, but they're careful, too careful. They never talk about it in public, and I can't legally bug their homes." I felt the last glimmer of hope fading. "So that's it. There's nothing we can do." "Not exactly," Jack replied, a note of hesitation in his voice. "I did find something, but it's not related to your case. It's about your sister." I sat up straighter. "What about her?" "She's having an affair, Erica. I have photographic evidence of her entering a hotel with a young man. Definitely not her husband. I also managed to record some of their conversations. It's not flattering to her husband, to say the least." For a moment, I sat in stunned silence. Then slowly, a plan began to form in my mind. "Jack," I said, my voice low and determined, "I need you to send me everything you have on this. And I mean everything." As soon as I hung up, I sprang into action. I spent the next hour poring over the photos and recordings Jack sent, my mind racing with possibilities. Finally, I made a decision. I selected the most stunning photo, my sister entering the hotel with her young lover, and sent it to her husband's phone with a simple message. "Interested in knowing what happened next? Meet me at Cafe Luna tomorrow at 2:00 p.m. The next day, I arrived at the cafe early, my nerves on edge. At exactly 2:00 p.m., Emily's husband walked in, his face a mask of barely contained fury and curiosity. "What's this about, Erica?" he demanded as he sat down across from me. I took a deep breath. "I think you know James, but what you've seen is just the tip of the iceberg." Over the next hour, I laid out everything I had. The photos, the recordings of Emily laughing about James's age, mocking his performance in bed, discussing her plans to leave him once she got her hands on the full inheritance. James sat in stunned silence, his face growing paler with each revelation. When I finished, he looked up at me, his eyes blazing with a mixture of pain and rage. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice hoarse. I leaned forward. "I want justice, James, and I think you do too. Help me prove that they framed me, and we can both get what we deserve." A few days after my meeting with James, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from him, containing several audio files. My heart raced as I pressed play on the first one. Emily's voice filled the air. "Can you believe how easy it was to plant that jewelry in Erica's purse?" My mother's laughter followed. I know the look on her face when the police found it was priceless. Well, she'll have no choice but to give it up now. I listened to file after file, each one filled with their callous plotting and cruel laughter. A mix of vindication and disgust washed over me. Finally, I had the proof I needed. The day of the will reading arrived quickly. I entered the notary's office, my stomach in knots, but my resolve firm. Mom and Emily were already there, shooting me smug looks. James sat quietly in the corner, giving me an almost imperceptible nod. The notary, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat. "Let's begin," he said, unfolding the document before him. He read through the will, detailing the distribution of assets, just as Dad had explained that day at the house. As he finished, I stood up. "If I may," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "There's something I need to address before we conclude." Mom's eyes lit up, and she nodded approvingly. "I'm glad you've finally come to your senses, Erica. I knew you'd make the right decision and give up the inheritance." Mom and Emily exchanged triumphant glances, their faces beaming with anticipation, but I was about to disappoint them. "I'm afraid you've misunderstood," I said, pulling out my phone. "I think you'll all want to hear this." I pressed play, and the room filled with their voices, gleefully discussing how they had framed me for theft. As the recording played, I watched the color drain from their faces. Emily let out a strangled gasp, while Mom sat rigid, her lips pressed into a thin line. When it ended, chaos erupted. "You lying scum," Emily screeched, lunging towards me. "How dare you?" Mom hissed, her composure cracking. "You ungrateful skemming." I recorded those conversations. James suddenly spoke up, his voice cutting through the commotion. The room descended into madness. Emily was screaming at James, Mom was hurling insults at me, and I stood there, watching it all unfold. Silence. The notary's voice boomed, startling us all into quiet. "This is a legal proceeding, not a circus. Everyone will calm down this instant, or I'll have you all removed." As the notary's words echoed through the room, a heavy silence fell. It was broken by James, who stood up abruptly, his face a mask of barely contained fury. "Since we're airing dirty, I have something to add." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph, slapping it down on the table in front of Emily. Emily's face drained of color as she stared at the image. It showed her entering a hotel with a man who was decidedly not her husband. "I know everything, Emily." "James, that your affair, your lies, all of it. I'm filing for divorce, and thanks to our prenuptial agreement, you won't see a penny. You'll be paying me compensation for your infidelity." Emily's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, no words coming out. Mom looked between Emily and James, her expression a mix of shock and dawning horror, as she realized their carefully constructed world was crumbling around them. Suddenly, the door to the notary's office swung open. 2 police officers walked in, their faces stern. "Mary and Emily Thompson," one of them asked, though it was clear he already knew who they were. Mom and Emily looked up, tears streaking their faces. "You're under arrest for false accusations of theft and attempted blackmail," the officer continued. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As the police read them their rights and handcuffed them, I watched with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. This was justice, but it was also the final nail in the coffin of our family relationship. I walked out of the office behind the police, watching as they put Mom and Emily into separate patrol cars. As the sirens faded into the distance, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was over. Taking out my phone, I dialed a familiar number. "Erica." My boss's voice came through, sounding concerned. "Is everything all right?" "Better than all right," I replied, a smile in my voice. "I can explain everything now. The accusations against me were false, and I have proof." I gave him a brief rundown of what had happened. As I finished, I heard him let out a low whistle. "Erica, I'm so sorry you had to go through all that," he said, genuine sympathy in his voice. "But I'm glad the truth came out." Listen, your job is still here whenever you're ready to come back. In fact, I'd be delighted to see you at work as soon as you feel up to it. A flurry of court cases and pivotal rulings characterized the weeks after the altercation at the notary's office. The charges against me were promptly withdrawn as soon as the truth was revealed. It was an unbelievable sense of relief, as if a burden that had been on my shoulders for months had suddenly been removed. But the horror was only getting started for Mom and Emily. They were charged with attempted blackmail and false allegation. The recorded evidence left no space for question, and the trial proceeded quickly and was scathing. They were ultimately convicted on all charges. From her bench, the judge gazed down at them, a severe-faced lady with sharp eyes. In addition to the criminal penalties, this court orders Mary and Emily Thompson to pay substantial damages to Erica Thompson for emotional distress and damage to her reputation. The penalty was enormous. Emily started crying as the sum was read out, and Mom's face turned pale. I saw from a distance as their lives fell apart in the days that followed. Dad left Mom an apartment, which she had no choice but to sell. It was a lovely location in the center of the city, but she lost control of it, and the money she made went directly to me as compensation for the damage. Emily's situation was far worse. She had to sell the house she had been so happy to inherit in order to pay her portion of the penalty. When I remembered her arrogant look on the day Dad made his will public, I couldn't help but smile. But Emily's troubles didn't end there. James filed for divorce as promised. He demanded reimbursement for her infidelity in the amount outlined in their prenuptial agreement. All of the meager money made from the sale of the house went to him. Mom and Emily had lost everything in a matter of months, including their affluent lifestyles, social standing, and financial security. They were nothing more than the products of their own actions. As for me, I found myself in a predicament I never would have thought about. My dad's gift, along with the damages I got from Mom and Emily, left me with more money than I knew what to do. After much consideration, I chose to buy a gorgeous apartment in a quiet section of the city. It had every feature I could have wanted in a home. It was spacious, bright, and most importantly, mine. With the rest of the money, I invested well. After spending hours researching and consulting with financial professionals, I made informed decisions. My goal was to provide a steady income for many years to come, giving me the stability I had always wanted. As I stood in my new apartment, looking out over the city skyline, I couldn't help but reflect on the stormy journey that had brought me here. The pain, the betrayal, the fight for justice. This was the culmination of it all. I thought of Mom and Emily, who are now struggling financially. Although I felt sorry for them, I also understood that they were coping with the consequences of their own choices. They had tried to take everything away from me, and in the end, they had also lost everything. A message buzzed through my phone, confirming that I would be going back to work the next week. I smiled, looking forward to getting back to my new routine. "Laundry," he said in a tremulous, irate tone.